think saying no is really the only answer. The other alternatives, though, um, you can find ways to live in that system, and I suppose justify the your submission. I do. I think that anybody who is functioning online does. So, but the I take a very tragic view of all this. I don't think that outside of alternative communities like hippie communes and Amish villages, I don't think that anyone is going to be spared the momentum of the present zeitgeist. It's just here, it is coming. I think that the most important thing that one can do is to be aware of the situation at hand as best one can be, to resist as much as one can, and if you can escape it, good. God bless you. If you can't, then you have to figure out ways to live a fulfilling life under what many call the beast system.
Welcome back to the program. My guest today is an accomplished writer and author, and he has written for such publications as Human Events, The National Pulse, and The Federalist. He's also an expert in cognitive science and human evolution, where he holds a master's degree from Boston University. He is here today to discuss his new book, Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. Please welcome Joe Allen to the program. Joe, how are you doing today?
Just fine. Thank you very much for having me.
Good, good, good. I'm glad to have you on. This is a very interesting and, of course, important topic. And, of course, I want to break it all down. I want to get into the book and all that. But let me just ask you this off the bat. It is often said that in the last century, in order to achieve tyranny, it was gotten at the barrel of a gun. In this century, however, it is voluntary. And that is the scary part. We are giving up all of our information through all these different social media apps, from emails. I mean, they're looking into all of our stuff. So they pretty much have like a blueprint of who everybody is. And of course, they hold on to that information. So technology definitely has been woven, I guess you could use, into all of our lives. And we've been conditioned to kind of give up some of our privacy and even our identities. I always say that tyranny is sold as convenience. Do you think that this has been done as a byproduct of the advancement of technology, or do you think there's a sinister design behind it?
I would say both. I think the technology just simply lends itself to that purpose. I wouldn't say that there's a single they behind any of it that I'm aware of anyway. There are many theys. They, in general, are in competition with one another, but at the same time, from the perspective of the average person, they work in such coordination as to effectively appear as if and act as if they were one monolithic whole. If you are an average person, it really doesn't matter if it's the FBI up your ass or if it's Facebook or Google. All of them function in ways that allow them to accumulate information, accumulate wealth, accumulate power, and pretty much every case at our expense. So, yeah, I do believe that this tyranny, while sometimes forced, is by and large voluntary. And I think that that is the lamest part about the quasi dystopia that we presently live in.
Yeah, I mean that's certainly one way to put it. Quasi dystopia. I mean, it's like 1984. Orwell's is coming to life here, and it has been for the last
Except
15 to 20
it,
years.
except Ingsoc has a rainbow flag.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. Exactly. So in the 1980s, it was automatic teller machines, right? That was the big craze. You can go get your money out of the bank. Then, of course, it became point of sale where, hey, don't worry about your cash, leave it at home. You can just run your card through the machine. Now, of course, from that point, what's the next step? Well, they want to do the mark of the beast, right? They want you to be able to have some type of a chip in your body or your hands so you can scan it. As a matter of fact, there's companies out there that are already kind of experimenting with it. There's an organization in Wisconsin that literally has people running their hands over snack machines and doors and things like that to use, in order to access things. So we can clearly see that it's kind of getting to that mark of the beast type of system. In your opinion, what would be the best way to combat some of these things? Obviously, saying no, of course, would be number one. But what can we do to kind of stop this advancement and this intrusion, which is basically the infancy stages of transhumanism?
Well, so far as the mark of the beast goes, I don't really think that there is a single mark of the beast, as in an RFID chip or a brain computer interface. I think that I see the Book of Revelation and its narrative as being much more poetic and broad, but I do think that there's an obvious correspondence to the technologies we see rolling out now. In the 80s, it was the UPC, the barcode. That was the big thing. Decades before, it was the social security number. As things moved along, and in 1997, they patented the RFID, human grade RFID chip, and in 2004, Verichip began to offer it to customers. People latched onto that. There are a number of other ways in which the hand and the head can be used in the manner that the Book of Revelation details. I go into this in my book quite a bit, but I think that it's really important to note that as long as people are focused on things like RFID chips implanted in hands, or NFC, near field communication is the new term because RFID sends shivers up people's spines. They kind of miss what's already happened, which is the almost universal digitization of financial transactions, the total digitization of people's personalities, people's faces, the various non-invasive biometric systems that are offered. For instance, the new Amazon One palm payment system, in which your biometric, the palm, the whorls of the palm are linked to one's government ID and one's credit card, and it in effect functions like the RFID chips that are supplied by companies like Dangerous Things or Biohacks in Sweden or Walletmore in the UK. So I mean, I think saying no is really the only answer. The other alternatives, though, um, you can find ways to live in that system and, I suppose, justify the your submission. I do. I think that anybody who is functioning online does. So, but I take a very tragic view of all this. I don't think that outside of alternative communities like hippie communes and Amish villages, I don't think that anyone is going to be spared the momentum of the present zeitgeist. It's just here, it is coming. I think that the most important thing that one can do is to be aware of the situation at hand as best one can be, to resist as much as one can, and if you can escape it, good. God bless you. If you can't, then you have to figure out ways to live a fulfilling life under what many call the beast system.
Wow, that's one way to put it as well. Look, I've said this before. They rolled out the Fed Now program in July, and there hasn't been a lot of fanfare about it. But I said that was the pregnancy stage of digital currency. Obviously, with artificial intelligence and of course digital back, currency and all of these things, you can see that is kind of moving towards what I guess you could say would be eventually, God forbid, the interaction or the commingling, if you will, of machine and man, which of course is what your book is about, Dark Aeon, which is transhumanism. So let's talk about that for a second. I mean, obviously, and we'll take a step back and we'll talk about the digital currency. I am scared to death about digital currency because I feel as though, in the wrong hands, certainly the government, they would be able to say, hey, we don't like what you're saying. We don't like what you believe. So therefore, we're going to just turn your money off. Now, in a lot of ways, I have said this, and I'm a solutions guy, so I try to come up with different things. What if we had a groundswell of support from conservatives out there that said, you know what? We're going to starve out the system. So, in other words, we're going to take our money out of the bank, we'll make a run on the banks, and we'll, basically starve your system so you don't have the money to create the digital currency. Do you think that that could be a solution if they try to roll out this digital currency, which again, it looks like they're obviously trying to do?
I think that'd be a wonderful solution. When you look at the debanking that is already occurring, you can see that the intent is there. The predecessors of what would be a totalitarian system under a central bank digital currency. I don't, looking at the landscape though, I don't really see enough fear or support for such a kind of boycott or a, a mass movement out of the system. It's possible, though, that people will be freaked out enough at some point that that could happen, and that would cripple the system ultimately. Mass defiance,
Right.
mass resistance, especially if it can be done without violence, which would just justify overreach by the government and God knows what sort of horrific responses, such as you see with January 6th. It's just a taste of what could happen. I think that mass resistance is possible. Minds can change overnight, but where we're at right now, this is still very much, I think, a minority view. People, of course, look at it and they get freaked out for about 10 minutes and then they scroll to the next thing. But as far as a sustained contemplation of the situation that we're in, whether it be in the US, in Europe, the situation that's already come to fruition in China and other communist or really quasi-communist societies, I think that it's first necessary to get people to understand that the system that we live
The
in
threat.
is
Yeah.
antithetical to human agency, to human dignity, to freedom as a whole. And as it's being rolled out, you can see all of these opportunities for more freedom in some ways, right? You really do have more economic freedom in a digital currency environment. That's what you see with all these people that are able to make a living online paid through digital currency would not really be possible at this scale if it was all mail order with checks and cash, right? So it's a double-edged sword, and it's very easy, I think, to fall into the illusion and what I believe to be the illusion of freedom within the system. But ultimately, it's just a matter of what you predict the future holds. Ultimately, I think that the real momentum is moving towards more and more social control and moving more and more towards a situation much like you described, wherein just arbitrarily someone's ability to buy or sell could be cut off with the flip of a switch. And we're close already. I don't really have a whole lot of hope for mass resistance. I think that for the most part, individuals or small communities are responsible for dealing with this however they can. But if it could happen, well, that would be fantastic. But we'll see.
Well, I think you could obviously see a lot of boutiques popping up if they try to do this, underground banks, things like that, that, still will take cash, things like that. But one thing that I would say is that we, the people, right, we're the majority being run and ruled by a smaller minority. And we have the power. We just don't know we have the power or we're afraid to use it. So, for instance, someone like Stephen K. Bannon, who I know that you're close with and do a lot of work with as well, or Tucker Carlson, or many others, maybe if we had 10 or so of the bigger names out there all got together and kind of, sound the alarm bells, if you will, on, everything that's happening with digital currency and everything else. I think that if everyone pulled the money out of their banks and starved the system, I think we could slow it down or maybe even shut it down and let everybody know that want to do these things that, hey, we're actually in control here, not you. Um, let's talk about the book now. Dark Aeon. Artificial intelligence, again, as I said before, is the infancy stage, I believe, of transhumanism. Once AI, though, becomes fully self aware, I think we're going to have a major problem. And I know that a lot of the people that have created, artificial intelligence have been warning about that, but they don't seem to care. I mean, it's, Elon Musk has said that he wants to be for good AI, not bad AI. Okay, well, that's great. I'm not sure exactly what that means. But in your book, you talk about transhumanism, which you define as the merger of humankind with machines. Again, I'm a solutions guy. What can we do to stop this transhumanism that somehow is being glorified? I mean, it's being glorified by the people at the World Economic Forum. I can't think of the guy's name, the guy from Israel, the Israeli guy who talks about how,
Yuval Noah Harari.
yeah, him talking about how he wants to become like a machine and everything else. Like, these people are insane. How can we stop this? How can we, fight against it?
I write a lot about Yuval Noah Harari in the book. I compare him to Elon Musk, looking at Elon Musk through his lens. I think Yuval Noah Harari, for those who only listen to the sound bites, gives an impression that's not really true. I've never really seen anything that he's ever written or said that endorses or pushes the use of radical technology. He simply describes the trajectory. He's a big hit at the World Economic Forum, so I guess people assume, you always hear these things like he is Klaus Schwab's lead advisor. I've never once seen any evidence of that whatsoever, other than just people saying it. Really, I think it's interesting what's happening right now at the World Economic Forum. These people, by and large, it's a broad mix, but by and large, they want to exert as much social control as possible in order to maintain the kind of post-World War II international order and extend it even further. And the number one threat that was spoken about at the World Economic Forum is misinformation and disinformation. I think it's very ironic. Most of what I hear from people on our side, due to grossly selectively edited clips of someone like, say, Yuval Noah Harari, the irony is that there is a major disinformation and misinformation problem, both, for them, for the kind of global order or globalist order, or the lefty hegemony in New York or Hollywood. It's a very slick form of misinformation and disinformation. They're very good at lying in a polished and professional way. On our side, you see a lot more of the kind of gross forms of misinformation and disinformation, utterly retarded theories about nanobots in the vaccine. Again, kind of, selectively edited clips of people like Harari and so on and so forth. As long as our side is unwilling to take on the responsibility of dealing with an information environment that's very, very complex, and to weed out all of the bullshit that is being fed, not only from the top, but also from people on our side, it's going to be pretty hopeless. Not only will our side be mostly delusional, but the powers that be will have ample justification for cracking down on the valid information, the valid critiques of vaccine technologies, the valid critiques of globalism, the valid critiques of state power and rampant capitalist overreach. So, what can people do about transhumanism? I don't think that again, I think the momentum is so strong that it's probably more realistic to think of how am I going to eke out a living? How am I going to maintain integrity in a system in which not just the globalists are pushing for radical technology and the adoption of radical technology, but also conservatives? Look at Gab, for instance, and Andrew Torba's projects using artificial intelligence to spread the word of Christianity and sound the alarm on the Jews. I don't think that we can really look forward to a world in which these technologies are going to be rejected en masse by any society. If it is, I'm not really aware of that society. I think that we are in a situation not unlike the Jews under the Egyptians and Babylonians, or Christians under the Roman Empire, or Gnostics and pagans under Christendom in the Middle Ages. I think that that's the kind of reality that we need to prepare for. And if you want inspiration on how to live and maintain integrity, I think that those are good examples, and none of them are pretty. So the more people are looking forward to, I guess, a pretty future, they better, I guess, reconcile themselves to the fact that artificial intelligence is going to be advanced as far as it can possibly go and integrated into every aspect of our lives. That will begin with what we already have, which are various sensors with algorithmic systems raking up our data and categorizing us, and oftentimes making decisions about our lives. But it will go farther and farther. I think that the metaverse technologies are still very primitive and ineffective, but they're getting better. And I think that especially as the younger generation adopts it, more and more of the immersive technologies like virtual reality are in some sense inevitable, at least for those who adopt them. And as technologies like the brain-computer interfaces, Neuralink being the most popular or the most widely known, but other systems that are already in effect, such as BlackRock Neurotech's BCI, they have over 50 people with those in their brains. Synchron is another with a dozen or more in their brains. These are patients, of course, who have been paralyzed, but they're also, in essence, lab rats for the experiments. Elon Musk has openly said that he wants to use Neuralink as a widely available commercial product. I think he's very serious about it. I don't know if these will go as far as these people want it to go, right? Whether it's artificial intelligence, brain-computer interfaces, genetic engineering, what have you. But what I'm absolutely certain of is if it just stays where it's at right now and continues to diffuse through the population, which is the trend that we see, and if it's adopted by both left and right, if it's adopted by both nationalists and globalists with their various narratives and reasons for doing so, then we again just simply have to reconcile ourselves to the fact that the world by and large is moving in that direction, and it's going to be a real struggle to stand still, let alone go back. But I think that all the efforts that people can put forward to do either of those things, to stand still or to go back, to resist, I don't think that they're futile in the long run any more than those were of the Jews under Babylon, the Christians under the Roman Empire, or even Gnostics and pagans under Christendom.
So what it sounds like what you're saying here, and forgive me if I say this, but it sounds like you're saying that we should, in some respects, just submit to what is happening and accept some of these things, as
I
moving
would
forward.
definitely not say submit at any point.
Because I wouldn't want definitely not to submit. I am not a fan of globalism. I'm a fan of nationalism. I don't support anything having to do with globalism, transhumanism, AI. I think all of it is evil. As I've said many times before on my show and on others, tyranny is sold as convenience. But you brought something up in my mind that kind of triggered another question here. We keep hearing about the trans movement, right? Maybe 10 years ago, you didn't hear much about it, but now all of a sudden, everybody's talking about it. Non binary this, I identify as that, I'm really this, I was born this, but I feel like I'm that. And you wonder if this was all completely planned, because if you can get human beings to no longer know or think exactly what they are as their birth sex, then maybe it would be much easier to incorporate them in a future society with a mechanical arm, or shall say maybe a mechanical leg, or maybe a mechanical brain, or whatever. And like, oh well, everybody is non-binary these days, right? Nobody has an identity anymore, so maybe it's part of that kind of maybe global conspiracy actually to push the transgender movement, which eventually pushes into transhumanism. Just a thought that I had. what are your thoughts on that?
I wish it were as easy as locating a central conspiracy, because then you could eliminate the conspiracy and the problem would be solved.
Yeah.
I think it's much more widely diffused and decentralized. I think that it's much more organic. I do think that, I mean, myself, I'm a religious believer, and I do I believe that that impression that the mind has that a broader intelligence, a greater intelligence is directing these things, sometimes translated into earthly conspiracies, other times translated into an image of Satan. I think that that is that instinct is correct, but I don't think the trans movement, for instance, I've seen so many different historical retracings of where the movement came from, and it comes from. You can definitely see certain trends, but it comes from, as far as I can tell, the general mental mode of modernity is one in which barriers are being broken down, conceptual barriers, but also actual physical barriers as the technology gets greater or has more and more sophistication and the ability to actually break down those barriers. So in the rise of modernity, you see the breakdown of the lines between religions and religious systems. You see the breakdown in the lines between nationalities and ethnic identities. You see, as you just pointed out, the breakdown of the division between men and women, between human and animal, and more so between human and machine. But I don't think that it's necessarily the result of any one earthly conspiracy, at least not one that I can identify. I think that you have many different nodes of power that have been suffused with this way of looking at the world, in which the organic is seen as mechanical and the mechanical is increasingly organic. And so, flush with the sense that they have tremendous power, not only over the mental state of the human being, but also the biological, the physical state of the human being, that you then, kind of inevitably wind up with all of these different centers of power that embrace things like transgenderism, that embrace things like transhumanism, that embrace open borders, that embrace religious pluralism or like the kind of ecumenical dissolution of any specific religious identity. Um, what's really astounding to me is that the transgender movement really does represent a kind of tiny minority of people, even with the explosion we've seen. I mean, it's alarming, especially among children, how many have adopted it, but it's still a tiny minority. And yet the vast majority of human beings on Earth have linked themselves to broad digital systems which rake over their identities, which seek to feed them information by way of algorithmic processes that link the mind directly to those systems. And yet it's not as freakish. It's kind of faded into the background. And so what one might call transhumanism, right, to go beyond the human by way of technology, for whatever reason, outside of just a few, again, people get the burst, they see a brain implant, they see that, a special with a woman with a wire out of her head, and they're like, oh my God, what if they did that to me? And 10 minutes later, they are, saturating their minds with all sorts of hopium or soma. So yeah, I think that they are in fact very intimately linked, but I don't see it as necessarily some centralized plan. I don't even think that you could locate a center of power in a place like the World Economic Forum or the UN or the Bilderbergs or the Chatham House or the Democratic Party or Harvard or J.P. Morgan or BlackRock. It is so widely diffused, and we are just so saturated with this way of thinking that, again, yes, I mean, I would love to see some sort of mass rebellion, or at least mass non-compliance. But I think that while hoping for that, it's best to prepare for the zeitgeist to run its course.
Wow, this has been a fascinating conversation with you. The guest is Joe Allen. The book is Dark Aeon, Transhumanism and the War Against Humanity. Where can folks go to learn more about the important work you do and, of course, to purchase your book?
You can get it at, I recommend people go to bookshop.org. It's the best indie market, even if it's run by lefties, at least they're humans. If you are acclimated to the beast, you can actually buy it with your palm from Amazon. And I also recommend going to Canonic XYZ. I am not a Bitcoiner or a Bitcoin guy, but their purpose is to teach conservatives how to use Bitcoin because it is one of many alternatives to the digital system that's being implemented, at least for now. The hope is to get a sort of, not unlike what you're talking about, enough of a critical mass that people can make a real difference in that way and use Bitcoin as a mode of exchange outside the system. But we'll see. I think it's best for anyone to explore there, but you can get it at Canonic XYZ if you got a little coin on hand.
Gotcha. Well, all I can say is that I will resist, I will fight, I will defy as best that I can, and I will motivate others to do the same because I see this technology as extremely dangerous. I see it as all encompassing, taking over our lives, our individual rights, our freedoms. Of course, that's why they're flooding, Western Europe. That's why they're flooding, the United States borders. That's why they're flooding all of these countries' borders because they don't want borders anymore. They want a global governance. Clearly, you can see that. Anyone that's paying attention can see that. But Joe, keep fighting alongside me, and we'll fight together, and we'll try to continue to activate and educate as many people as possible to the dangers of all the things that we have discussed today. So thank you once again for being on the program. I wish you nothing but the best of luck.
Thank you very much, sir.
God bless.
Hey, Josh Bernstein here, America's favorite bald badass. Did you know that Bill O'Reilly charges $6.95 a month to see his content? Or how about the Blaze TV, who charges $10 a month? Or you could always subscribe to the Ben Shapiro podcast at $12 a month. But if you are looking for the best value and the most hardest hitting news, you've come to the right spot. Because here at joshbernsteinuncensored.com, we drop the most jaw-dropping stories 7 days a week, starting at only $3 a month. So please head on over to the new releases tab, become an exclusive member of the Badass Nation, and join the fight to save this country with one of America's most hated, feared, and censored conservative voices. Remember, if it's banned on social media, you'll find it here. God bless.